Hello everyone, this is Fadi and I want to welcome you to a brand new video series. Now, I know this may sound strange to some of you or most of you since we are used to hearing that the Quran is an Arabic Quran or an Arabic book sent to the Arab people, along also with the fact that it's a universal message, but the primary message is written in Arabic. We are going to unpack a number of resources that are really available for people to access. We will be sharing the names of these resources with you along the way, but we wanted to show you that there is actually a strong evidence out there that would suggest that the Quran as we know it today could have originated from another prototype, possibly even Aramaic type. And we will present to you many reasons why this possibility is, strongly valid, simply because the sources have presented enough evidence to back it up and support it. Obviously, our job here is not to sway you one way or another. We want you to examine the evidence as always, and you be the judge. Now, with me here, of course, in studio, is Dr. Jay Smith. Dr. Jay, thank you so much, of course, for being here with us. And thank you for these fascinating topics that you always agree to present and work with us on.
Well, this is good to come into your studio and to introduce this new material. And this is new. And remember, we did a live stream in the studio a while back and I brought 5 different experts in 5 different areas. And we introduced this object. This is a sifter, and we're calling ourselves the sin sifters, the Standard Islamic Narrative. That's what sin is. It's the Standard Islamic Narrative, and we're putting the Standard Islamic Narrative into the sift, and we're seeing what comes out the bottom, what really was there, because we're interested in what really happened in the 7th century. And to do that, we have to sift through and throw out all that does not belong. That's what a sifter does. It throws out all the bad stuff, or it keeps the good stuff depending on what you use it for. In this case, we want to get rid of all of this Standard Islamic Narrative, which is about the Quran. That's why I'm wearing brown today, because this is about the Quran. And we want to put it into the sifter, and we want to see what happens at the end. And we're going to be going through quite a few segments in this series and looking for that Quran, or that archetype, or the proto-Quran, I guess is the way to put it.
Right. So in the first episode of this series, we want to talk about the modern scholarship and the idea of an archetype of the Quran. Now, I'm going to read to you quotations from an article that is found actually on Cambridge.org, written by a brilliant scholar, Mariam van Putten. And I'm just going to read to you his introduction in an article and a couple of other statements after that, just for the purpose of letting people see how the modern scholarship looks at the Quran, and also our way of trying to also wrestle with the theses out there based on that, and the findings, for instance, that could taint even a different picture. Okay, so here's what the introduction of that article says. Throughout the history of Quranic studies, a general unease about the date of the codification of the Textus Receptus can be perceived. Traditionally, it is believed that it was the 3rd Caliph Uthman ibn Affan who codified the rasm, or consonantal skeleton, of the text as we have it today. This was famously challenged by Wansborough in 1977, as you and I know, who posited that the collection of the canonical texts can only have taken place as late as 2 or 3 centuries after the date traditionally assigned to it. Now, he goes on to say, with the discovery and description of many early Quranic manuscripts that are clearly earlier than the late date proposed by Wansborough, it is now clear that this position, meaning the position of Wansborough, in its most extreme form, is to be discarded. Nevertheless, many of the reasons for skepticism about the early date of the compilation of the texts haven't been dispelled, and a general unease remains in the field of Quranic studies. And this is where I want you to pay attention to this. This paper, he says, aims to show not only that all the early Quran manuscripts descend from a single written archetype, but also that the text was clearly spread through the copying of a written exemplar. Okay, I'll turn it over to you.
Great stuff. And this is exactly what I would expect, Van Putten. Right. And don't just say Van Putten. Everybody says this is this is the narrative that you will hear. This is the only narrative. Now, do you see the problem right here? Why is he saying that? The reason why is because the Standard Islamic Narrative says so. So what you're doing, you've seen Western scholars who are assuming that the Standard Islamic Narrative, which is the 9th and 10th century, you're talking about Al-Bukhari here. You're talking about Al-Bukhari, volume 6. Hadith number 509 and 510. Everything comes from those two little hadith, those two references. We're going to look at that later on, because that is, and that written by Al-Bukhari. Remember, Al-Bukhari was writing this just before he died, so this is between 850 and 870. That's the 9th century. Muhammad died in 632. The Quran was supposed to have been finalized by 632. You're now in 870. That's 240 years later. 240 years later, you have these two hadith, just two references about two different Qurans, one the Abu Bakr Quran, and a second one which then had to be written a second time. We're going to get into that later, which would be the Uthmanic. And he's talking about the Uthmanic one. That's 652.
That's right.
It's 20 years after the fact. If you're going to start from that premise, as everybody does, you're going to have to impose that onto what you're now finding. So do you see the dilemma for Putten? Van Putten, do you see his dilemma? He's created already a problem for himself. He's got to now prove that by looking at the material that he has. So what is he saying? Well, I have these manuscripts, and we now have, and he's going to give you the manuscripts. He's going to talk about the Sana'a manuscript from Sana'a, Yemen. He's going to talk about the Petropolitanus manuscript, which is National Bibliothèque there in Paris. And he's going to talk about the Samarkand, which is in Uzbekistan. He's going to refer to the Topkapi, which is the best one, there in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. He's going to talk about the Husseini manuscript, which is in Cairo, and he's going to talk about the Ma'il manuscript, which is right there in London, the one that we have.
British Library. Yeah.
British Library, 2165 manuscript. Those are the six that he's going to refer to, and he started from the premise that these are not, interestingly, not one of these is from the time of Uthman. Notice he hadn't said that.
The Turkish scholars themselves made that declaration as well.
That we didn't know before 2007.
Right.
Before 2007, everybody thought that these were from Uthman.
True.
In fact, even when you look at the Topkapi, which is the Mus'haf al-Sharif, that which is written and printed by Altekulich and by Ekmen al-Ansardu, what is on the title? Attributed to Uthman.
Right.
That's all they can say is attributed.
Right.
So can you see the dilemma for these modern scholars? They've got to hold on to that narrative. So what is he going to do now? He's going to have to try to prove his point by showing that these different manuscripts all use the same words. And if they use the same letters, like the Tar Marbuta or the
Ta Maftuha. Okay. I mean, like in this article, he's talking about a word, you know.
And what word is it he's using?
He is showing that there is a word, rahmatullah, for instance, where you have ta marbuta or ta maftuha, for instance, or ni'matullah, ta marbuta, ta maftuha, and shows that as it was transmitted or being copied, it remained the same, which is a proof in his mind that there is an exemplar. Now, it's a brilliant argument. I'm not going to definitely sit down here and say that there is not a valid argument, if you wish, but there are other sources.
What's missing? What's missing in that whole statement?
You're still focusing, like you said, on the Standard Islamic Narrative and overlooking anything.
Okay. Yeah. What is missing? I'll tell you what's missing. Number one, he's talking about an Arabic Quran.
That is true.
He's talking about Arabic words, letters.
Right.
Exactly. That's an Arabic letter. Therefore, he's talking about something that is much later. He's talking about something from the 8th and 9th century. I want to know what's happening in the 7th century. He's not mentioned Uthman. None of these are from Uthman. He never has said that in this article. He doesn't even say, he says attributed. He has to always put the word attributed to Uthman. I want to know what really happened with Uthman.
Are you talking about Van Putten saying attributed?
Does he ever say that this is from Uthman?
Well, he's making the case that it is Uthmanic, basically.
Yeah. But how can you do that? By looking at manuscripts that don't even begin to appear till 705.
I hear you.
And Uthman did this in 652. So already there is not a lie. He's not saying a lie here, but he's stretching he has to stretch it because he does not dare say what we're going to say, because I don't care diddly swat about the 8th century. I don't care diddly swat about the 9th century. I want to know what happened in the 7th century. Why aren't they going to the 7th century? Why aren't they going to the very century that all of this happens? And that's what we're going to do in these series. This series, we're going to go back to the 7th century, and we want to look at the real Quran. We want to look at the real archetype, and we want to go to what we are calling the proto-Quran, because it does come from somewhere. It does come there. So I'm going to stick everything that Van Putten is saying in here. He's part of this, and I'm going to see what comes out at the bottom. But see, it's going to take quite a few episodes to get to that.
Right.
So this is a good introduction. Let's start with the modern scholars. The dilemma for the modern scholars is they have to say this because they dare not go outside. We're going to do a whole segment on the problem with academia today, because academia is caught. They're caught in a vice. They're caught in a vice because they have to stay in here. They don't dare come out down the bottom. They have to keep all their material, and they've even got to prove their point. And I feel sorry for the Van Puttens of the world, because the Van Puttens of the world are restricted. There's no other area of research I know where this is the case. Would we ever say this about the New Testament or the Old Testament manuscript
Absolutely
evidence?
not. Absolutely not.
No. We kept with the Latin Vulgates? No. We went right to the Greek manuscripts when they were discovered. Remember when Tischendorf discovered the Sinaiticus there in the 1800s? Or is it the 19? What was it? Is the 1800s when you have Tischendorf, and he came across this manuscript. He didn't sit there and say, "I don't want to dispel this. I don't want to skip. I don't want." He had to take that manuscript, bring it back to Britain. They had to go and date it to the 4th century. That was dated, and there's been an enormous amount of research. Did they ever constrict themselves to an archetype or an Bible or a proto-Bible? No, they and they followed where the evidence lay, and that's why we've done it with the Bible. We're not going to do it with the Quran. And that's why what we're going to find out now, what the Germans have found out especially, is going to change everything that the narrative has told us. And this is why, in some ways, this is going to be a difficult series for Muslims to listen to. But it is absolutely essential if they're going to hold any responsibility before the world as far as the claims they make about their Quran. Because what we want to do now is we want to go and unpack what really in the next episode, we want to unpack what really Islam is saying about their Quran.
The Standard Islamic Narrative.
What does the Standard Islamic Narrative, what is it that we're going to see being put in here that has been taught all over the world that the Van Puttens have to listen to? We need to understand that. We're going to unpack that in the next episode.
Wonderful. And of course, for the sake of our viewers here, some of the topics that we will address in the future, I'm not going to give them to you like in a specific order here, but we're going to talk about, like you heard next time, about the Standard Islamic Narrative as opposed to the other findings, for instance, that will there is a tension between other evidence as opposed to the Standard Islamic Narrative itself concerning when the Quran was compiled, for instance, by whom, and so on and so forth. We're going to talk about something called the 63 fragments, and we'll leave it like that because when we get there, I think you'll find it very interesting. We're going to talk about the claim that the Quran is preserved. In other words, that today's Quran, the 1924 Quran, is the exact replica of the Quran that was, for instance, rescinded by Uthman. In fact, Van Putten and others would also make a case that today's Quran is no different than the Quran that was in existence 14 centuries ago. We are going to talk about how did this collection itself of the Quran originated, the role of Omar in there, the dotting and vowel marks and all that kind of stuff, the true prototype, and that's when we're going to start venturing into what we call the Aramaic layer or background of the Quran, the problem with academia. And there is so many other things that we will be unpacking throughout this particular video series. So I hope everyone will be enjoying this. Anything else, brother, you want to add to this?
No. And what we're going to do, by the time we get to the end, wait till you find out wait to the conclusions of what we're going to find. I can't wait till I get to the conclusions, but I'm going to have to wait and hold my excitement because what we do, we really want to find that proto-Quran. We do want to find what Van Putten is talking about. We want to get back to the archetype. We want to get back to the Quran.
Right.
Wait till you find out what we are going to show you.
And I want to point out to our viewers these sources right here, specifically these three, the yellow one, the one in the middle, and the blue one. And the reason why we have them here, because we will be referring to them periodically, and we're going to show you, like, the authors of these books make a compelling case that there is a prototype that the Quran borrowed from. Now, this is scholarship, right? Jay, and scholarship demands research. Scholarship demands finding ways to have tension with another, let's say, thesis, for instance. This is a thesis versus the Standard Islamic Narrative thesis. But sadly, so far, from my own experience and from my own research, the Standard Islamic Narrative thesis have holes that are hard to basically cover. There is gaps that you have to really wrestle with, where in fact, in sources like this, you can easily make a case that, okay, oh, now we know where it came from, or now we know where it originated from. So this is why we want to share these things with you. And again, we have it here because we're not really bringing something from out of nowhere. It's available. Anyone can buy it, right?
Yeah. 50 years of scholarship.
Anyone can go and buy
those 3 books. 50
Absolutely.
years.
Yeah, and we're here just to show you that we're relying on these sources. Please go and buy it, absolutely. Don't tell me so-and-so attacked the author. That's not what we're talking about. We want you to go and read what the author's written. Because I'm familiar with negative views, because just because it goes against what? The Standard Islamic narrative. You're always going to have attacks against it. I mean, we have thick skins, by the way. We don't care for these kind of attacks. We want to present evidence, and that's what we care about. So hopefully you will enjoy this ride. It's going to be sometimes rough. It's going to be difficult. If you're a Muslim watching this, you may not even like what we're talking about. But at the end of the day, we really want you to have firsthand look at things that sadly no one most likely is going to share with you outside of this particular media and this particular environment. So hopefully you'll find it beneficial to you. Until next time, have a blessed day.